Yo, what's going on, guys? It's JMass. It is a beautiful, hot summer day today. I'm out here in the middle of the woods, and as I film this video, it is the 4th of July. So happy 4th of July to everybody watching this video. I'm sure none of you are actually watching this on the 4th of July because this video is going to come out several days later, but regardless, happy 4th of July to everybody. That being said, I have a really fun video planned for today. I'm actually out here in Little River State Park in the beautiful town of Waterbury, Vermont. I mean, you guys all know Waterbury, Vermont, right? That's the place where the Ben & Jerry's headquarters are. You also have all the great shops like Cold Hollow Cider, Cabot Cheese, Lake Champlain Chocolates. I mean, I love Waterbury, Vermont. I've been here so many times, but I've actually never been to Little River State Park, and I've really wanted to. There's a really interesting abandoned community here. It was once known as Ricker Basin. It was first founded in 1816 by Joseph Ricker, who's actually the namesake of Ricker Basin. It operated for well over a century until 1934 when it was officially abandoned. The community is no more. Most of the buildings have been razed and demolished, but a little bit is left behind, including foundations, cellar holes, a cemetery, and as far as I'm aware, one single building. So what we're going to be doing today is exploring the abandoned ghost town community of Ricker Basin here in Little River State Park in Waterbury, Vermont. So why don't you guys join me? I'm going to get started going on this beautiful hike today and see what it has to offer. After arriving in Little River State Park, I parked at the trailhead for the Dalley Loop, the nearly 4-mile-long loop trail that I'd be taking. However, before I began, I took a look at the trail sign posted out front. As you can see, this Dalley Loop Trail will teach us about the rich local history of Ricker Basin while we hike, and believe me, the history on display is extensive. Thus, while I hike the entirety of the Dalley Loop Trail, I'll be narrating my entire journey, step by step, all while we dive into the history of this formerly thriving community-turned-ghost town. After taking one last pause to view the map of the vast trail network, I began my descent into the woods, starting off on the Dalley Loop Trail, which, as you may be able to tell, is one of Ricker Basin's former town roads. I was immediately charmed by the lush green foliage surrounding me. It was quiet, calm, and peaceful, although I would occasionally run into other hikers or cyclists. As I worked my way down the trail, I reflected on the story of Ricker Basin, which was founded in 1816 by Joseph Ricker. The settlement sat along the slopes of Ricker Mountain, right nearby Little River, becoming a farming community with some industrialization. While the community steadily grew in population during the mid-1800s, farming was a challenge due to the rocky and rooty soil. Speaking of which, I stumbled across the first of many old farm ruins dotting the vast woods that once made up Ricker Basin. These are the ruins of David Hill Farm, as shown by this historical plaque, which would become a welcomed mainstay throughout the hike. As the name suggests, this farm was owned and operated by local farmer David Hill, who first purchased the property in 1837. Unfortunately, all that remains here is a small cellar hole, visible only by a small dent in the earth, held up by foundational stone walls. Like this one, cellar holes are a common sight at Ricker Basin. They serve as reminders of the many homes, structures, and buildings that once defined this small farming town. Another common sight are rock walls, of which there are many. These rock walls once served as perimeters, boundaries, and fences for farms, especially for grazing pastures. I stumbled upon yet more abandoned farm ruins, with this one being the former Burt Goodell farm. Burt Goodell purchased this property in 1891, along with another house nearby in 1896. Compared to the previous cellar hole we just saw, this one was much larger, defined by wide stone walls, once serving as the foundation for a farm building. More rock walls could also be seen, solidifying the farm's boundaries. In similar fashion, both David Hill and Burt Goodell worked at nearby sawmills. In fact, the timber industry was one of Ricker Basin's primary industries, and at its peak, the town possessed 3 active sawmills. I continued on with my hike, and I must say, I was enjoying the beautiful natural scenery surrounding me. As I walked along the gravel path, several small creeks and streams passed by me, with the occasional small cascade coming into view. I was also lucky enough to witness some truly gorgeous wildlife during my hike. Case in point, this majestic deer. I've seen hundreds of deer over the years during my many hikes across New England, but this deer was different. It was not afraid of me and stood pretty close by. If anything, he seemed curious, as if he were wondering what I was doing on his land. He stood just a couple yards away from me, occasionally peering over at me before continuing on with his grazing. I would see a couple other deer in my hike as well, but none as close or as curious as this one. I found another historical plaque detailing the locals' use of the bark of eastern hemlock trees for tanning animal hides and leather production. Directly next to the plaque sat two odd metallic objects. I wasn't exactly sure what they were, but they looked like aluminum or sheet metal, maybe some sort of pans. Coming across tools and trinkets like these would also be common, as they are remnants of tools once used by the farmers of Ricker Basin during their many daily tasks and duties. Next up, I came across one of the cooler ruins left behind from Ricker Basin, an old bridge, with this one seemingly referred to as High Bridge. At one point in time, this bridge would have carried numerous people, horses, carriages, and farm equipment. Now, it sits abandoned and neglected, quietly crossing over the rushing waters of a small creek, connected to a small side trail off the main path. It was interesting seeing what was left behind at this bridge, from the actual bridge structure itself, made of old, rotting planks of wood, to the stone foundation underneath, holding it up. By the bottom of the bridge, along the creek, an old stone tunnel can also be seen, carrying the water underneath the old road. While small, this bridge was but a peek into what the former farmers once used for transporting goods, animals, and people across the rugged terrain. It was also beautiful, especially amid the trees and rushing waters. As I continued on with my hike, another staple of Little River State Park I came across on several occasions were the many vibrant butterflies congregating around the lush plants and flowers, searching for nectar. It was mesmerizing watching these delicate creatures fly around and land on different plants. Anyways, I would soon be approaching one of the most iconic landmarks here on the Dalley Loop Trail, and one I was honestly the most excited to see up close and explore. What we're about to check out now is the Almiron Goodell Farm, and you may already remember hearing the Goodell name in this video. We already explored the ruins of the Burt Goodell Farm, with Burt being one of Almiron's two children. However, this was his father's farm, and it just so happens to contain the only fully intact structure still standing in the site, dating back to the days of Ricker Basin. Almiron Goodell bought this farm in 1863, meaning that this wooden farmhouse structure was likely built sometime around that time frame. As you can tell, this farmhouse is very simple and bare bones, consisting only of wooden frames and shingles. However, and rather unfortunately for me, the entire building was boarded shut, with no way inside. I couldn't even peek inside either. Still, I walked around the entire perimeter of the building, taking in this unique historical landmark. At this very site, Almiron Goodell lived with his wife and children for several years, raising farm animals like cows, chickens, and a horse. There were a few things I enjoyed seeing while exploring this farmhouse, from the shingled roof up top, to the metal siding near the bottom of the structure, to the handmade nails that were once used to piece it all together, to the small signboard that declares this as the only house still standing in Ricker Basin. While it was a bit of a letdown not being able to venture inside the farmhouse, I nonetheless enjoyed witnessing this historical structure, standing as one of the most important surviving landmarks and symbolizing the rustic legacy of Ricker Basin. As I left the Almiron Goodell farmhouse, I approached a small wooden bridge, seemingly much newer than the previous, crossing over yet another rushing creek. As I mentioned earlier, creeks and streams are a common presence throughout these woods, and each one was truly a beautiful sight to see. When I turned around on the bridge, I was greeted by a unique view of the farmhouse, perched on top of the stone wall foundation beneath it. Continuing on with my journey, I stumbled across another historical plaque detailing the history of apple trees, which were planted by the farmers throughout Ricker Basin. Apparently, the apples that grew here were primarily used for apple cider, and as an avid enjoyer of apple cider myself, I can appreciate that. While walking alongside the meadow where some of these apple trees were planted, I could spot one in the distance, the direct lineage of those trees planted by the settlers. Now, these apple trees serve as a food source for local wildlife. As I hiked onward, I spotted some more farm ruins, with this one being the Patsy Herbert Farm. Built in 1897, this was one of the largest farmhouses in the region, comprising over 500 acres of land at its operational height. While this massive farmhouse is long gone, a substantial cellar hole is left behind, unmistakable from its wide stone walls. This was one of the deepest cellar holes I would see during my visit, but surprisingly not the largest by area. During its heyday, Patsy Herbert pursued many agricultural activities, cultivating oats and potatoes, and even engaging in logging. Today, only rocky ruins remain. Continuing on with my hike, I was reminded by this historical plaque that the path I've been hiking along was once a town road used by the residents of Ricker Basin. While it's today relegated to hikers and cyclists for recreational activity, this road once serviced horses, carriages, and farm equipment quite regularly. An interesting point to note is that, by the mid-1800s, over 50 families lived in and around Ricker Basin, meaning that roads like this were frequently used and much needed for day-to-day transportation. Next, I'd be visiting another site I was excited to explore in this park, one of several old cemeteries where some of the former residents of Ricker Basin are interred. This particular cemetery, seemingly referred to as Upper Cemetery, primarily possesses the remains of the Ricker family, particularly those who were related to the town's founder, Joseph Ricker. This cemetery is surrounded by an iron gate, and all the gravestones are facing east, based on traditional Christian values of the time. Interestingly, only some of the graves are marked, with a few either unmarked or illegible. This was a beautiful cemetery, but also quite haunting considering the context. This cemetery serves as a stark reminder of a once thriving farming town that no longer exists, and these were once residents of this town. To me, it felt like I was visiting a forgotten vestige of an entire lineage of people, from a community that has fallen to the wayside of history. Directly next to the cemetery was a sign for some more farm ruins, known as Patterson Farm, which was first purchased by Alexander Patterson in 1881. Sadly, despite looking around the premises, I could not actually locate the ruins themselves, only spotting a small rock wall, overgrown with foliage and vegetation. Thus, I continued on, hopping back onto the trail and soaking in the lush green scenery. Thankfully, the next spot was another old farm site with much more to see. This was the former James Carney Farm, purchased by Irish immigrant James Carney in 1863, although the actual site itself dates back to as early as 1820. While some old cellar holes and rock wall ruins can be found at this site, perhaps the most unique thing left behind are the tools and materials that were once used at the farm. While I can't identify what many of these are, you can see a plethora of rusted metal items, likely used as farming tools and equipment. This includes some long rusted metal pipes and axles, which are sitting at the foot of the rock wall. Interestingly, James Carney operated a large maple farm here, with over 700 tapped trees, collecting sap for maple syrup. Now this was an interesting sight, the old Ricker schoolhouse, which accommodated the children who lived in Ricker Basin. The school closed for the first time in the late 1800s as attendance declined, before reopening again in 1908, only to close for good in 1921. Sadly, despite looking, I could not locate the actual ruins of the school. They were either buried under dense foliage or camouflaged. Likewise, I stumbled upon another large former farm site, this one being the William Clossy Farm. First purchased in 1894 by namesake William Clossy, it was later purchased again by John Cameron in 1912, an experienced logger. This old farm site had a few deep cellar holes and wide rock walls to explore, making it one of the most immersive sets of ruins I explored thus far. There is one small, yet deep cellar hole that pushes into the earth, with a long rock wall a couple yards north of it. On the other side of the trail, a much larger set of ruins can be found, defined by tall stone walls, likely previously serving as a foundation or even walls for a building. However, this site also features a few remaining tools and trinkets, including this old metallic bucket or pail which is now sitting atop a rock wall, alongside some other miscellaneous rusted metal debris. Nearby, another old rusty item can be found, although I'm genuinely not sure what it is. but it looks like it was once part of some sort of farm equipment or machinery, perhaps a plow of some sort. Once again, I found some more farm ruins, with this site being the former location of the William Randall Farm. Interestingly, the historical plaque details the life of George Randall, William's grandson, who was born on this farm in 1825. After striking it rich during the 1849 gold rush in California, he returned to Ricker Basin and bought more land, expanding the farm and its operations. Despite how big the Randall farm once was, all that was left behind here was an old rock wall and a large meadow of ferns, with no visible tools or cellar holes. Sadly, this next stop would be a bust. I approached a sign detailing a new cemetery that lay before me, known as Wingate Cemetery. Supposedly, this cemetery serves as the burial site for Mary Ann Wingate, possibly related by marriage to previously mentioned William Randall. However, after nearly 15 minutes of searching through the dense forest, walking down several small trails and clearings, and scouring along the many rock walls scattered throughout the area, I could not locate the cemetery. Granted, only 2 small gravestones are visible, so they may have been too small and hidden to be easily detected. As I continued on with my hike, I knew I was slowly approaching the end of the Dalley Loop Trail, with just a few more stops left. By now, I had been trudging through the vibrant green wilderness for hours, hiking over 3 miles already. One thing I began to notice was that the trail I'd been following, which was a clean gravel path most of the way, was now transitioning into a muddy mess, with some small potholes and trenches filled with dirty, muddy water. On a few occasions, I had to bypass or jump over sections of the trail to avoid getting my shoes wet. Still, I was heavily enjoying the trail and the peaceful serenity of the forest, from the many chirps of birds to the buzzing of insects, creating a harmonic symphony of sounds surrounding me. I walked by another historical plaque, detailing the many stone walls found throughout Ricker Basin. As you've seen throughout this video, stone walls are a constant sight to witness, serving as boundaries and fences. After a bit more hiking, I arrived upon another old farm site, this one being the Thomas Hurlburt Farm. This is another relative of someone we've discussed earlier. You may remember Patsy Herbert, who was the son of Thomas Hurlburt. Interestingly, Patsy tweaked the spelling of his family's surname to make it easier to spell and pronounce. Anyways, the site of the Thomas Hurlburt Farm consists of a rock wall and a well, which plunges 27 feet deep into the ground. This well once served as the Hurlburt family's drinking water source. Today, it is now barren and empty, marked only by this wooden square showing the location. I tried to peek inside the well, but could not see much other than darkness and rocks. Very soon, I approached another historical site that I'd been excited to see. This was yet another cemetery, but it was by far the largest cemetery left behind in Ricker Basin. This one is known as Ricker Cemetery, and as the name suggests, many of those who are buried here are members of the Ricker family, with the plot itself started by Gideon Ricker Sr. Unlike the previous Ricker family cemetery we saw, this one does not have an iron gate, but rather a stone wall serving as a perimeter. There are several gravestones congregated around each other, facing east. Many of the gravestones are legible, with the names and dates clearly marked. I also felt that this cemetery was in very good condition, with the gravestones appearing to be maintained and cleaned regularly. There was one gravestone which appeared to be split in half, however. As I mentioned before, it feels rather ominous and haunting being in a cemetery like this, knowing that the town it once existed in, and the community that held reverence here, has not existed for nearly a century. Everyone who is buried here left behind a community that soon became lost. In essence, this gravesite is a remnant of a forgotten family in a forgotten town, now situated deep within the overgrown Vermont forest. Still, I appreciate that cemeteries like this still exist, as well as the many other ruins left behind, telling the story of the families who once resided in Ricker Basin, making sure their names, stories, and memories are not entirely lost. Speaking of the Ricker family, I stumbled upon the ruins of Gideon Ricker Sr.'s barn, which, according to the plaque, was massive in size and scale. There is a circular impression in the earth where a grain silo once stood, which also makes for one of the more unique-looking cellar holes I've seen during my visit. Nearby the silo hole, the massive ruins of the barn structure itself can be found, consisting of wide and tall stone walls, once serving as foundational support structures. In terms of size, this was one of the largest ruins left behind, serving as a reminder of the importance of farming and agriculture to the people who once resided here. Eventually, just a short walk away, I stumbled upon what would be the last major historical site of my journey at Ricker Basin, the Gideon Ricker farm itself. If you're wondering, Gideon Ricker Sr. was the brother of Joseph Ricker, coming to the new settlement from Maine in 1839. This site quickly became one of the largest farms within the entire community, and the ruins left behind clearly showcase this. Much like the previous spot we saw, large and wide stone walls make up a majority of these ruins, likely once serving as foundations for barns, farmhouses, and other structures. In the woods beyond, stone walls marking the property could be seen. However, what I loved most about this specific site were the numerous tools, items, and materials left behind, many of which were very rusty, crumbling away with time. One of the strangest items I found at the Gideon Ricker farm is this cylindrical device here, covered in spikes. Upon my research, I discovered that this was likely some sort of spike lawn aerator, used to poke holes in the soil. I must say, this was a great spot to end my journey on. Perhaps one of the largest farm ruins left behind, once owned by a member of the storied Ricker family. After leaving the ruins, I continued to work my way down the remainder of the Dalley Loop Trail, getting closer to the end of the loop itself and nearing the parking lot. Soaking in the natural beauty and scenery while I still could, I reflected on what brought Ricker Basin to its unfortunate demise. By the late 1800s, families began leaving quickly due to poor soil quality, which made farming difficult. Furthermore, subsistence farming in general was on the decline. This population loss was further amplified by two devastating back-to-back floods in 1927 and 1934, respectively. As this final historical plaque displays, these floods prompted the government to dam Little River, creating the Waterbury Reservoir, which still sits nearby to this day, for flood control purposes. Following the damming of the river and the creation of the reservoir, Ricker Basin was effectively abandoned, and soon enough, all structures and buildings would disappear, with the one exception of the Almiron Goodell farmhouse. Hey, thank you guys for joining me. I've been J-Mass as always, and today we explored the abandoned ghost town of Ricker Basin here in Little River State Park in the beautiful town of Waterbury, Vermont. Now, I've been wanting to come check out Ricker Basin for many years now, and I'm glad I was finally able to get over here and bring you guys along with me, because Ricker Basin truly is a remarkable historic site with so much to see, from rock walls to stone foundations to cellar holes scattered everywhere. We saw a few cemeteries and gravestones, even the iconic farmstead cabin, which was really cool to see. And of course, many tools and trinkets scattered around. It really is like an archaeological site here, a remnant of Vermont's early European settlers. Again, I had a blast walking around the many trails here at the base of Ricker Mountain in beautiful Little River State Park. And man, I've been doing a lot of walking today. I've been walking for slightly over 5 miles in total while filming, well over 3 hours. And it is a really hot and humid day today, so I am sweating buckets. But nonetheless, an absolutely fascinating sight to see. If any of you ever find yourself up here in the Waterbury, Vermont area, I could not recommend Ricker Basin and Little River State Park enough. There's also the beautiful Waterbury Reservoir nearby. But anyways, guys, I've been J-Mass as always. If you love urban exploration, checking out abandoned sites, and traveling all around New England and beyond, checking out the histories and what there is left behind, I'm always doing that on this channel. I do want to give a major shout out to all my channel members. You can see them all right here. You guys are awesome. And I'd love it if you too, the viewer of this video, consider becoming a channel member as well. You'd be supporting me and the channel directly, and I truly appreciate it. Or you can follow me on Instagram at JMassOfficial. That's at JMassOfficial. But yeah, guys, I've been J-Mass as always here in Waterbury, Vermont. I am currently making my way back to my car on this loop trail right now. I still got a little bit of a ways to go, but I'm almost at the end. But check out this beautiful site I'm in. You can probably see the rushing streams behind me. It's very hilly and rocky around here. Pretty cool. But yeah, let's continue. Probably another mile, or at least half a mile until I get to my car. See you guys later.